Welcome to the Rock Your Dream Body interview series. I am so excited to tell you that today I am interviewing Tricia Nelson. So Tricia and I have been in each other's worlds here for a little bit, like a while now. And we actually connected a while back and then we reconnected just recently. And I interviewed her husband, Roy Nelson, about a month ago. So you may have seen his interview already. But today we are going to be talking about Tricia's story and specifically her new book that just launched, which I'm so excited to show you guys. It's called Heal Your Hunger. And Tricia actually just dropped it off to me today. So I had a chance to flip through it and I'm so excited to dive into it. I have so many great questions for Tricia that I think will be really helpful for everyone in the community. And so just to dive in, I want to tell you a little bit about Tricia's background. So she says, or her bio says, Tricia lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her emotional eating. Tricia has spent close to 30 years researching the hidden causes of the addictive personality. During that time, she has worked alongside her husband, spiritual healer Roy Nelson, to help hundreds of people overcome their addiction to food and other addictions. Tricia is an emotional eating expert and author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. She's the host of the Heal Your Hunger show. And Tricia is also an internationally acclaimed speaker and coach and has been featured on NBC, CBS, KTLA, Fox, and Discovery Health. So welcome, Tricia.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, I am so, like I said, I'm so excited to talk to you because I think that a lot of women can connect with your story and, you know, really have gone through a lot of the same stuff that you have. So I'd like to start there and just really dive into, tell us a little bit about your transformation.
Absolutely. Well, I grew up as a fat girl, as I like to say. It was a really painful thing. I mean, as far back as I can remember, I was obsessed with food, absolutely obsessed. I love to eat and I love to think about food and cook food and serve it to others. And, I just, everything was food. If my family was going out to dinner that night, I was like having heart palpitations like throughout the day. Like it was a really big deal. So food was a big highlight. And so I ate a lot. Like I just was eating all the time. And I didn't think anything about it. I just thought I liked food. And then I did at some point really start gaining weight. And I was a really chubby kid. And at one point, oh my goodness, my mom wanted to buy me if you can believe it, they had a clothing line called Chubettes. I mean, like how stupid is that?
Wow.
Right. So my mother's like, well, maybe, she's trying to find clothes that fit me and I liked clothes. And so she's like, well, maybe we should try that line. I'm like, no, we're not. I'm never buying something called Chubettes, And so, but that was sort of, the situation we were facing as I was really overweight and I hated it. I hated being fat. It was so painful to me. And I had this roll on my tummy. My body is built to where I have a tummy no matter how thin I am. I have this roll on my tummy and it's the way God made me. And so, but when I'm a lot bigger, it was a big roll and I could like get my hands around it and with both hands. And I imagine slicing it off because if you have fat on a steak, I'd seen them slice off the fat. I'm like, well, this is all fat. So, I should be able to slice it off, no problem. Well, thank God I didn't try that. I wouldn't be sitting here today. But anyway, that's kind of the desperation I felt. I imagined getting some disease where I would automatically lose weight. I thought about, when I get old enough, maybe I'll join the army and I'll be forced to go through boot camp. So I'll have to exercise because I hated to exercise. So, some pretty violent, crazy, desperate thoughts around my weight. And that's, in my experience, that's what happens is when you can't stop eating, basically, you think of these crazy, machinations to try to control your weight. And so, nothing worked for me. I went to, gyms and I did diet programs and then I ended up going to Overeaters Anonymous and I went to, therapy. I had eating disorders therapist at some point. I was going twice a week for a year. So I was really playing out the stops, and I was reading all the books. So I wasn't just doing the diet thing. I was really trying to dig into the emotions and psychology of the whole thing also. But no matter how much I learned, nothing worked for me. And so, I get control for a little bit, but then I'd bust out all the time in a binge, and then I'd be off and running again, and my weight would yo-yo, I'd lose 10 pounds, gain 15, lose 5, try to lose the same 5 pounds for a whole summer. It was just really miserable. And basically what happened is I felt, because I'd done so many things so early on in my life, I really felt like I'd tried everything. And so at age 21, it was like, I've done it all. I've done even the things that are supposed to be the last house on the block, and it's not working for me. What am I going to do? Because I literally, as far as I could tell, I was going to spend the rest of my life just yo-yoing with my weight. And if I was lucky, if not, become obese. So I didn't know what to do. And I met a gal. Actually, I'd known a gal who was bulimic. I knew her in OA, and she had been obese, lost the weight, and then, as everybody does, she started overeating again, and then she became bulimic to try to control it because she didn't want to get obese again. So she was, doing the dance of death with bulimia, and it took on a life of its own, as it does, and she couldn't stop binging and purging for a day. And she'd show up at meetings, and she'd always confess like her binges and purging episodes. And bless her heart, it was so hopeless because everybody had sponsored her, everybody had tried to help her, nobody could help her, and it was just sort of this sad, uncomfortable thing for everybody. We don't know what to do with this girl. She's so hopeless. And I showed up at a meeting one day, and she was leading the meeting, and she said, I haven't binged and purged in 2 weeks, and I haven't had the desire to. She said the desire's been lifted. And I remember looking, and you could tell, she wasn't pathetic and whiny. She was confident and poised. And she's I'm developing a relationship with a higher power that I've never had before. And I just looked at her, Sheila, and I was just what in God's name happened to her? Something happened. I'd never heard a story like that, such a transformation that I could literally see with my eyes. And it wasn't like she'd lost a bunch of weight. She was the same weight. She was transformed, And so I was really in awe of that. And then another gal, same type of situation. A couple days later, I saw at a meeting, and she had the same clarity and strength and poise, she'd overcome her struggles. And I just, I couldn't believe it again. And I saw her the next day, and I said, what are you doing? There's something different about you. And she's oh, I'm working with this guy, Roy. And then she's she started sort of apologizing, yeah, well, that's what it's come to. I know he's fanatical, but that's where I had to go. And I'm like, I don't really care. Just give me his number. Because she said, oh, and this other gal is working with him too, the bulimic one. And when she said that, I saw such distinct transformations in these people. I just was I don't care what his deal is. I'm calling him. I want what you guys have. And so I called him that day. I literally went home and called him, and I asked him for help, and I went and visited him. He was in another city. I drove to another city that day to visit with him. And I'll tell you, it sounds so trite, but my life has never been the same since. Literally, it was so profound. And from interviewing him, he's a very special guy, and he just has this depth of spirituality, and it just goes straight to your heart. He can just goes right through the bullshit to the heart, and that's what he does for people. And he did that for me, and I just started working with him and being mentored by him. And it really did change everything, because he told me, my problem has nothing to do with food and weight, everything to do with, the inside stuff, and so he helped me address and heal the stuff, the emotions and the twisted thinking and all these self-concepts that I had that were really blocking me from any kind of weight loss success. So that's what happened. And I was privy to watching other people transform right before my eyes. And I just said to him, I'm like, I want to help you. Like, I loved being around him and hearing him. I felt so spiritually fed by him. And I just wanted to go wherever he went, wherever he was speaking, I'd go. And I just, like, he couldn't get rid of me. And so, so I just was like, I want to help you. Like, I want to get people to you. Like, that's my goal, is I want to help people get this help that I've gotten. And so that was almost 30 years ago. And we've been walking this path together, ever since. And about 8 years ago, we ended up getting married. So, yeah, he's just a real sweetheart. And I just feel very grateful for that. And then, he helps me with all addictions because he's going deep to the root cause. It really doesn't matter what the addiction is. And if you go deep enough, all the addictions get healed. Instead of swapping, addictions or deck chairs on the Titanic, I like to say, you can, if you go deep enough, everything gets healed. And so, but my favorite thing to really teach and talk about is emotional eating, because I'm such a, incredible emotional eater. And to me, it's the hardest addiction to overcome. And so, that's really been my specialty, if you will, alongside of Roy's, really sort of making sense out of all that. And so recently I did write the book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And I speak a lot, and I have a program, that kind of thing. So I'm really trying to, Roy works deep dive with people in person only. So I'm really trying to bring everything I've learned from him with regard to food addiction online, to the world, because I just think it's so vital.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, there were so many different things that you shared that I think really resonate with, the women that I work with in the community, that like this idea, well, first of all, yeah, like you said that emotional eating is the hardest addiction to heal. We eat food every day. So it's like, you kind of have to show up on a daily basis and sort of, battle your triggers. And I think that, once we start to identify them and we can see like what's going on, that's when we have this sort of like this hope. You said that the one girl was hopeless. And so I'd love to hear, like, what was it for you once you started working for him that was that shift, or working with him that was that shift, that you really started to recognize, like, oh my gosh, this is the area that I actually need to work on and heal, so that the food is no longer my crutch?
Totally. It really was about, and still is for, obviously for everybody, but in my experience, it's really about helping people deal with their life, because the thing that people don't ever understand is that, food served 3 purposes for me, and this is true with everybody with addictions, I believe, and we've coined this as the PEP formula, and so the P stands for, people think about what food's doing to them, it's making me fat, I can't run as fast, I'm uncomfortable, I'm bloated, blah, blah, blah. They don't think about what food is doing for them, and that's really what we have to start to look at. And basically I use food as a painkiller, because I had a ton of pain inside, emotional pain. I was sexually abused as a child. I buried that. I was insecure. I felt bad about myself. All that stuff was very painful. So I use food as a blanket over all those emotions. I use food as an escape because I was terribly afraid. Emotional eaters, pardon the pun, but we take the cake on fear. I had a lot of fear. And so, everything terrified me. And I had a big personality. I was president of my school. I played varsity sports. I was goalie, in 2 sports. That's very courageous things that I do. But inside, I trembled all the way. I was so afraid, and I would eat, literally, speaking of being goalie, I was so terrified, and it was so physically painful to have that position at school, in sports. And so they tended to feed us really starchy meals on game day. So on Wednesdays and Saturdays, we'd have game day. Well, I would eat so much macaroni and cheese and tater tots the day of my lacrosse games, because I was so terrified. And plus all the pressure, like you're a goalie, like you make or break the game. It was awful. So I'd waddle out to the field stuffed to the gourd because I'd eaten so many carbs, just so cookies on top of that, just so I wouldn't feel any of the fear. And so that's really what it is. It's an escape from all those, scared, feelings that I would have. And the last thing is a form of punishment. And people don't often think of that. But, I always regarded food as a treat, right? We reward ourselves with our favorite yummy foods. And so I'd, make a pound of brownies and have a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and I'd sit in front of the television and I'd be like, I'm treating myself. But the next day when I was bloated and fat and, didn't want to see my friends and canceled appointments, that's no treat, that's punishment. And I did that to myself. And so I believe that in every addict, there is this underlying desire to punish ourselves because we're so prone to guilt and feelings of guilt. So, consider the painkiller escape and punishment, to cover up pain, fear, and guilt. That's really what was driving me, and really that's what I had to get down to. And there's in my book I talk about, okay, pain, fear, and guilt, that's still pretty big. How do we chunk that down? And that's where I have something called SOURCE, which is an acronym for several different areas we need to look at in our lives to really understand where that pain, fear, and guilt gets generated. And so, but the bottom line is that I had to go deep. I can't just slap a diet on the situation or a bunch of nutritional information because, let's face it, people who have struggled with food and weight for a long time, we could write the book, right? like we're not stupid. We know what we're supposed to eat and what we're not supposed to eat, but following through on it is a whole nother, ball of wax. Excuse me. So, the reason why we don't follow through, to me, is because of that underlying stuff that needs to get addressed, basically.
Yeah, I think, you make a really good point that I think a lot of women struggle with diet and sort of the whole control factor. They're trying to control their body, they're trying to control themselves, and a lot of times they feel like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do the diet? But it's really not about like controlling on the surface. It's about digging deeper and really looking at what are those feelings and emotions that you like bump up against, but then you run away from because you don't want to experience them again.
Totally. Yeah. It's really, we overeat to run from ourselves. So obviously when you say, well, the solution is to face yourself, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, that's not the solution I want. That's what I'm trying to avoid. But unfortunately, it's a tough pill to swallow, but that is what it takes. It takes getting uncomfortable. But, in my experience, that's impossible to do unless you feel really safe, and so what I got when Roy worked with me is a feeling of safety, and like anything that would come out of me was okay. Because I think I had the sense that what was inside of me was so dark and so awful that, conventional wisdom is that if you've got this monster inside of you, if you open the gate and let the monster out, the monster will completely consume you and consume everybody around you, right? But it's really just the opposite, is when I'm willing to face it. When I feel safe enough to go there and I'm willing to face it, it dissolves. It turns into dust, and that's what's counterintuitive about it, is that when I face these feelings that I'm running from so hard, they don't overtake me. They actually they completely dissipate.
I think you're right. Like, it really does. That feeling of safety, that feeling of like, no matter what I say, it's okay. It's safe for me to express myself. It's safe for me to go through this. It's safe for me to cry. It's safe for me to be angry. It's safe for me. Whatever comes up, it's coming up because it's time to release it and let go of it.
Absolutely.
And for women, do you feel like, so I don't know if you work with men as well, but I feel like for women, there's a piece of us that feels like it's not okay to express ourselves. It's not okay to be heard or sad or angry or have emotions. It's like we've been told for a long time to put your emotions away. Just show up in your masculine, do this thing, get the job done and put those emotions aside. And I think that's actually a detriment to a lot of women.
Absolutely. It's, and I do think it's more typical for women to, you know, squelch their voice than men, although men who are emotional eaters do have the same, you know, typical problems in that they aren't expressing themselves. They have more feminine, a lot of times more feminine qualities as well. But, I mean, I think anybody who feels bad about themselves is hiding their voice, you know, like it's a vicious cycle. But, you know, in my book, one of the 7 simple steps is communication, because it is so vital that we start expressing ourselves and being authentic with who we really are. And I have this thing called the 10 secrets to expressing yourself with confidence, which have helped people so much to come out and start, you know, testing the waters of speaking up. And it's been a lifetime journey for me. I mean, I was the consummate people pleaser, and I didn't want to say anything that would piss anybody off, you know, and so I ended up being pissed off all the time as a result. But it does take practice to speak up and express ourselves, and every day I have to practice it. And I think the more I think the spirituality is so important, because the more connected I am spiritually, the more I feel like I am safe enough to say, like, I'm not going to crumble. I thought I would crumble and die if I said something and somebody would disagree with me, you know, and I'd like backpedal. Oh, well, I didn't exactly mean it that way, or let me rephrase it, or, oh, you're right. You know, all that crazy, you know, people-pleasing machinations around not being who I am because it's just not good enough, you know. And so it's just really important to know that, you know, I am good enough, and what I say is just as valid as anybody else on the planet. I mean, anybody on the planet, my opinion is just as valid. And so, but it does take time to realize that. And again, that's an inner journey as well. Doing that inner work will help me know even more that I am worthy of speaking up and speaking out.
Do you feel like that's the underlying root of pretty much all sort of self-sabotage, emotional eating, you know, whatever it is, any sort of addiction that we have, is this feeling of unworthiness?
Totally. A deep-seated sense of worthlessness is what I call it. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and where we get it, you know, I can't exactly say for sure. I mean, I think it's sort of curious. I mean, I do believe that we adopt it from our parents for sure. Although I tend to think I brought it with me as well, and maybe attracted my parents on account of it, because it is so deep. You know, my parents were highly functional, super, you know, great people, but they had it too, you know, and still to this day, when I'm around my mom and, you know, we're out at a restaurant, or, you know, I want to return something because I'm very clear about what I want, what I don't want in my food. And if I can't eat dairy and there's cheese shredded on top, I'm going to say, I can't do this. Sorry, you know, get me another one. And she just about dies when I do that. Like, she's like, oh, you can't, like, just, you know, just whatever, just eat it anyway, or whatever she'll say. I think she knows better than to say that at this point, but she's mortified basically. And it's just that sense of not being able to, you know, be who you are and just say what you need to say and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. So, I mean, I think we do adopt it. If our parents have some of that, we're going to get it, but other things as well. I mean, I think the sexual abuse certainly can help us, you know, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it hurts a lot, but I just mean, it's a big help in making us feel like shit, you know, about ourselves. And so it's really, we get it from a lot of places, I think. But the bottom line is I have to take responsibility for the fact that I have it, and nobody's going to make me feel worthy. I have to walk my way into that. And that's just by practice and standing up and returning the food if it's not right, and knowing it's going to be okay. You know, every little thing. I mean, I literally the other day had to say something to somebody who was a little too touchy with me. I was at a conference, and it was a male who I consider a somewhat new friend, but he just was too touchy with me. And I'm not, you know, I mean, I'm not a ball buster, you know, I mean, I hug men, you know, but I am married, you know, and so there's a line, and I just felt like it just crossed that line. And I said something to him, and did I want to do that? No, I did not want to do that. It was very uncomfortable for me. But I thought, you know, either I'm uncomfortable or he's uncomfortable. It's going to be one of us, and I'd rather it not be me. you know?
How did you phrase that? Because I think that is a thread that is very common with a lot of women when it comes to emotional eating and self-sabotage. It's like a violation of some type in the past creates this belief that, you know, like, there's so much shame attached to that. Like, did I deserve it? You know, and all that. But then
it's awful.
Standing up for ourselves now and really being in our confidence around our body and this vessel. So I would love for you to sort of model, like, how did you say that in your power?
So I didn't say it right away because I was like, this isn't really, and it wasn't like, it just was like putting his hand on my leg to to make a point. He had his hand on my leg. That's not necessary. You know what I mean? Or rubbing my back to say hello, and just a little too much. You know what I mean? Again, I love people and I'm affectionate. So I'm not, you know, I'm not a cold fish, but I am married, you know? So there's things that are okay and things that aren't okay. So it's just too much, and it just was unnecessary. And frankly, it disempowered him. And he's a really bright guy, and he's a coach, and he has, you know, great insight, and he coaches a lot of women. And I just thought, what a bummer, because I can't even hear what he's saying to me, which is of great value, because I'm noticing that he just keeps touching my damn knee, you know? So he's doing himself and his own message a disservice by doing that, but that's beside the point. I mean, bottom line is I didn't say something at the time. I just like moved my leg and was like trying to like be not so accessible for him to touch. And then, but I noticed the next day, I just woke up feeling very angry, you know, and just very violated, and like, ew, like that was so yucky. Like, why? Like, that was so unnecessary. And so I thought about it in my head, and I thought about saying something to him, and I was around him all day at the conference, and I avoided him, frankly, and I kept thinking, I've got to say something to him, but wasn't quite sure when to say that. And at the end of the day, he spoke to me about when I was leaving or whatever. I said, can I talk to you for a minute? And again, I don't want to have to do this, but I did. I couldn't leave with it, you know? And so I just said, look, I want you to know that I just really felt like you've been too touchy, and I'm not into it. Like, it doesn't work for me. It's like, wow, I didn't mean anything by it. And I said, well, it doesn't work for me. You know, I said, I'm married. I just said, I'm married. You know, like, it's just not okay, you know? And so I left it at that. And I was very nice. I wasn't a jerk, or like, I wasn't mean or angry at him, because ultimately I had to take responsibility for it. I could have said something at the time. Like, that's what I wish I'd said at the time. I wish I'd said, can you stop touching me? Like, it's not necessary for this conversation. But I didn't quite have my voice then, you know, I was just like, can I just avoid this and get around it? But, you know, when I woke up with that kind of anger, and again, it was anger at myself, because I hadn't drawn the line where I should have. But the next best thing was not leaving the conference with it, you know, because I will see him again. And if I don't say something then, it carries over, and it just mars the whole thing. And so, and I had to say, I had no choice. That's, as far as I could tell, I had no choice, because, you know, share it or wear it, you know, that's the bottom line. And it's, you know, this is exactly what this is the point here, isn't it? Is that it's my life that causes me to overeat. Like, the way I live my life is what drives me to the food. And so this is really, I'm so glad you sort of hone in on this, because it is it's the decisions I make or don't make that end up causing me to feel bad about myself, and end up, you know, using a painkiller or escape or a form of punishment. And this could have been any one of all three of those, you know, or all three, because, but ultimately, and I think it's an important point to make, it was, you know, even though I didn't ask him, and I don't think I invited that, at the same time, if I don't stop it, you know, I am complicit in that. And I do, you know, I can't do anything about other people except say what I have to say and get the hell away from them if it's not comfortable for me. But if I don't do that, I am the only one I have to blame.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like recognizing this emotion is just an indicator for me to address it, to pay attention, right? Like, yeah. Okay, if I'm waking up feeling angry, something's going on here.
Yeah.
The other piece too is like, people don't know, you know, how to treat us unless we tell them. And this guy, you know, who knows? I don't know him, but like, one of the things I learned from the Queen's Code, the book, The Queen's Code with Alison Armstrong, which is so good about relationships, is like, honestly, sometimes men think like they just think differently. He may have learned this is a way to connect with people and I want them to feel safe. And so I want to touch them and hug them and give them love. So in his mind, he's thinking, oh yeah, we're really connected. I'm doing something really good. And unless you tell him, he's never going to know. So he might keep going on doing it to other women, just thinking this is what's, really helpful.
It's really true.
Just standing in our power and saying it is hopeful to us because it allows us to speak our truth, but helpful for other people too, and like understanding what healthy boundaries look like.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, I can't be the only one. Like, I'm sure he's this way with everybody, but I can't be the only one who's bothered by it. Like, it just can't be.
Yeah. And so that's a good segue into healthy boundaries, because I think that a lot of times we women being nurturers, we want to take care of people, but somewhere along the way it gets kind of twisted and we start to get attached to it. Like you said, people pleasing, feeling like it's our responsibility. And then we get into this place where we are resentful, or eventually we're like, what about me? And then that's when it shows up where we're trying to comfort ourselves or give ourselves love with whatever's the easiest way, which is a lot of times food. So do you work with your clients on creating healthy boundaries, and do you have any tips on that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so much about that, and again, I have something in my book called The Anatomy of the Emotional Eater, where there's 24 character personality traits that I've identified that emotional eaters have, like, to the nth degree. And the number one trait is being a people pleaser, because I feel like that gets us into so much trouble, because we're trying in so many ways for so many reasons. I mean, we're trying to get our validation, first of all, from the outside of us instead of inside of us. It means we're ending up overdoing, we're overcommitting, we're working too hard, and then we're never, ever appreciated to the extent that we planned on it. That the unspoken deal we made with people were like, you're going to like praise me.
Validate me.
Yeah.
You're the validation I need.
Yeah. Lots of praise. You're going to tell other people, everybody's going to be like thinking I'm great. And when that doesn't happen, we end up pissed off and resentful. And resentment is another big one for emotional eaters. And what do we do when we're resentful? We go home, we console ourselves with food. So it's a really ugly, situation, just starting by this simple trait of wanting to please other people. And so, which is really about being pleased ourselves, like, because of what we think we're going to get. So basically, boundaries have a lot to do with it. And emotional eaters are boundaryless. I mean, we do overextend ourselves. We do say yes way too many times. And we're in these messes. We're just in these messes and these trysts with people that are chaotic, and emotional eaters are stress eaters. And guess what? Most of the stress is created by us and the decisions we make or don't make. So much of it is about disentangling ourselves from these situations that we've gotten ourselves into. And so it's a big part of the work that we do with people. And so it's just, at first, it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard for people to set those boundaries, again, because we don't feel worthy. We're afraid of the love that we're going to lose. But if you really just calculate out the cost, it's really important that we evaluate, what it's costing us to be in that relationship with somebody, and what we're in it in the first place. I mean, I worked at a battered women's shelter many, many moons ago. But when I started working with Roy, it was like, now what am I doing there? Like, I've never been a battered woman. Like, why am I working there? And my motives were really kind of skewed. Like, I was doing it for the validation that I would get. I was doing it because I was angry at men, and I was angry at men because I really was angry at my dad, because for whatever reason, he was actually a good man, but I was angry at him. So basically I just had all these mixed up motives around working at a battered women's shelter. So I stopped working there. Like, I just was like, I got clear about the fact that this is not who I am. Like, this is not, sure, it's noble. It's a noble thing to do, but I was at a place, like, that was not my truth. It was just these misplaced motives. And so that's the kind of thing I had to start doing, is really looking at, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is that okay? And I had to ask that about really all of my relationships. Like, Why am I in this relationship with a person? So typically we're in relationships with people that are very one-sided. Like we're doing all the work, we're sending the gifts, we're sending the cards, we're making the phone calls, and that's just that's not a fair shake, and it feels bad. Chasing somebody to have a relationship isn't really a relationship. And so I had to pull back from a lot of friendships and see what happened, and if I never heard from them again, well, guess what? It really wasn't a relationship. It was all fabricated by me. But that was stress in my life that I was creating just by, trying to make something that wasn't there. So it's a lot to look at. I mean, a lot of life situations that we have to look at and disentangle ourselves from in order to get real. Like it's really about getting real and honest about who we are, what our purpose is, and whether the things we're doing is serving that purpose, whether the boards we're on are really, our truth, is that really a cause we believe in? Or did we just say yes because somebody asked us, where it fed our egos, there's so many things we're doing in our life that are actually creating that pain, that fear, and that guilt that we end up eating over.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times what it comes down to is we're constantly trying to manage things. So we're trying to manage other people, manage their experience, manage our relationships so that then we can feel how we want to feel. And it's sometimes we're trying to control them and make them happy or make them do what we need them to do. And ultimately, like pulling back, like you said, and realizing like my greatest control is inside of me. And I can release myself from needing to control anybody else or whatever they choose to do or say, or, let them be themselves. But ultimately I get to choose how much I be around them or, how much I let them tell me what they think I should be doing or whatever else, and giving them their responsibility, giving them their power back, because, that's the greatest gift we can really give to anyone, I think, is to model that.
Absolutely. Yep. It's a whole life change.
It is. It's a totally different way of looking at things. It's like when we recognize that, a lot of these things that we've been doing just because we've been doing them for a long time, it's not ultimately serving us or allowing us to feel the way we want to feel or have the impact that we want to have, then, what's the point of it, really?
Absolutely.
So just to wrap up, I want to ask you that one of the things in your book that you talk about is the number one weight loss mistake that you should never make. And I think that that's a topic that I know a lot of women in my community would love to hear your take on. So tell us about that.
Well, I'm sure you'll agree with me on this one, but it's to skip meals. It's just most eaters, I find, we have that sneaky part of our brain that says, oh, if I skip breakfast, I'll lose weight. I'll get ahead of the game. And, or if I work through lunch, and eat dinner late, I eat a good dinner later, first of all, I'll get a lot more work done, be more productive, but also I'll lose weight. And it's not a conscious thing. It's sometimes people forget to eat, but there is that little tricky little devil inside of us. It's like, ooh, this is a way to fast track my weight loss. And it never plays out because our bodies are depending on that food. They're depending on those nutrients, that brain food in order to get through the day and to deal with stress and everything else. And when we shortchange ourselves, guess what? Our bodies win. They will get the food they need. And unfortunately, when we're so famished, it ends up not being the food that it's supposed to be, or the amounts that it's supposed to be. And so, I find that people ultimately will eat so much more when they skip meals because they make up for it later and it turns into an out of control binge. So it's, but trying to convince ourselves, again, it's one of those counterintuitive things. Like if you actually eat 3 meals a day, you will eat less than if you're trying to skip meals. It's absolutely been my experience and experience of many other people. But I think even more than that, to the point is that you can't trick the system. That trying to quick fix mentality, that kind of trying to trick our bodies into making them what we want them to be is just, it will never pay off. So that's my number one mistake.
Yeah, your body knows. And that's why I think that so many times when we do skip meals, we crave sugar or carbs because your body's like, give me energy now. And I know I can get it from these specific things. So that's why you crave those things. I even sometimes, it depends on what I'm about to do, but I'm a foodie as well. And if I'm going out to dinner, depending on the place, for example, I always talk about how I love going out for chips and guacamole and margaritas with girlfriends. And that was like the thing that I deprived myself of for a long time. Is like, nope, I don't trust myself in those circumstances. I will not go out because I will eat too much and I will have too many margaritas or whatever. And that was like, part of my story where I just was a hermit instead. And I felt pissed off because I didn't get to do those things. So sometimes now, if I know I'm really hungry before I go, and say if I'm going, there'll be chips and salsa, I'll have like a shake or a snack before I go, so I don't show up starving. Because I know if I show up starving, I'll just eat a bunch of chips and they won't, like, it may be a little bit satisfying, but if I would be able to show up and be a little bit hungry but not starving, then I could eat slower and be more satisfied with the experience, and probably eat less than if I didn't have the snack,
Yeah. We got to get in touch with what we need, and respect and honor that.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. I think that's really at the basis of all of this, is really connection, like connection with yourself, connection with your source, being conscious, being aware. These are the things that I've done in the past. Like, why did I do them? What would be more loving for my, what sorts of behaviors would be more self-loving? And that's really a big part of the message that I talk about is going after any sort of goals that you set for yourself, whether it's physical or, in life in general, from a mindset of self-love and self-discovery. And I think that's really a part of your message as well.
Absolutely. Amen, sister.
Yeah. Well, great. So, again, I love speaking with you. I know that anyone who checks out the book, they're going to get so much out of it. Tricia is amazing. I can't wait to dive in, and I'll be sharing my thoughts once I get into it on social media as well. So thank you, Tricia. And just to wrap up, where can everyone find you? What's the best place to send them so that they can get your book? Maybe you have a free gift or something that you can offer that they would love to check out.
You bet. There's actually a quiz on my homepage of my website, which is healyourhunger.com, HEAL, healyourhunger.com. And the quizzes will tell you if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or where you are on the spectrum, because it really is a spectrum. So you'll get a personal score when you take that quiz, and you'll actually get a prescription based on that score. So I definitely recommend everybody start there, and it's at healyourhunger.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Again, awareness. Once you know, then you have the power to do something different. So that's such a great tool. So I just wish you the best with this launch and everything else with the podcast. Everyone make sure to check out Tricia's podcast on iTunes. I'm sure those episodes are amazing. I have to check them out myself as well. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing in this world. So thank you, Tricia. Thank
you, Sheila. So I'm so glad we got to do this.
Yes. All right. And everyone, I will see you on the next interview.